The tragic case of Sandra Birchmore comes to us in the wake of the Karen Reed case.
Another case involving questionable actions by law enforcement.
It's like a real nightmare.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
And today with us, we have attorney Yoli and intern Red. And also joining us for this episode today, we have the lovely Rosie from True Crime Overtime. How are you doing today, Rosie?
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me over.
Yeah, thank you for joining us on our channel today. Following up with the Karen Reed case, we're taking a turn and looking at something completely different that is still going to have serious ramifications from the Karen Reed case. We are looking at the case of a young woman and her experience with law enforcement.
First of all, Rosie, thank you for joining us and welcome to our esteemed panel. It is so nice to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And for anybody that doesn't know, we're all here in the U.S. Lainey and I and Red are all on the East Coast. Yoli is way out on the West Coast in California. But Rosie, you join us from South Africa.
Yes.
And I've enjoyed watching your episodes once or twice. You took us on a tour of Johannesburg. And I thought that was fascinating because a lot of people talk about, going to Europe or going to Bermuda or going here or going there. And I've read about Johannesburg, but I never even thought of going there. I just thought it was really interesting that you gave us a tour. What made you decide to do that?
I think we were out on location for a potential crime that day, but everything turned out to be okay. So I thought might as well, show you guys a little bit of the area since, like you say, you haven't really thought about visiting. A lot of people overlook South Africa, but it is really beautiful. Yeah. So I highly recommend.
Yeah.
Looked interesting. So one more question before we launch into this horrible, tragic case. Rosie, of all the stuff that's out there and your channel, which I highly recommend to people, is True Crime Overtime. And, you're way over there. What made you pick this case?
The Sandra Birchmore case? It was an accident, really. I was doing research for the Micah Miller case, and I just saw a headline about this case and just went from there. I just got interested in it, and yeah.
Okay. So the first red flag is the early issues in Sandra Birchmore's early life. And Rosie and everybody just chime in at any time. Sandra Birchmore, from her youth, suffered a very difficult home life. She struggled as a child with the loss of her grandmother and her mother. And as she grew up, she dealt with some significant mental and emotional problems for which she sought psychological care. At the age of 13, she joined the Stoughton, Massachusetts Explorers Program, an activity designed for young people with an interest in law enforcement careers. Stoughton, for those of you who are not familiar, is a south suburb of Boston. Miss Birchmore was a vulnerable person who had one constant in her life, an unwavering admiration for police officers, of people serving in the military, and people in uniform. Through Explorers, she met Robert Devine, the program's leader, and the twins, William and Matthew Farwell, who participated in various capacities. Rosie, you told us a little bit of something about those two twins. What were your impressions of those?
For the most part, I find it very interesting that they were in the program. As youth as well. And they were in the program under the leadership of Robert Devine. So that was where they all met. And a lot of people have used the phrase that they were almost groomed into being groomers, if that makes sense. I'm not sure about the accuracy of that, but I think that it is interesting that they started in the program.
Wow, that is interesting, yeah.
So they were taught to be groomers. Is that what you're saying?
Some of the people that I've spoken to have have kind of alluded to that from speaking to other participants in the program. So
Mhm.
that is where they started off as youth there.
Yeah, unfortunately, you have kids in an unsafe environment. They're going to pick up the habits and learn from the people who are supposed to be the adults around them. It's not necessarily, obviously, like the kids are victims. They don't realize what behavior is happening that's inappropriate. It just kind of starts becoming their reality, I imagine.
Yeah, while I was researching the case, I learned that like the Explorers program actually has a long history of abuse, like across America.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
That's
pretty sad.
So let's go inside the Explorers. According to a civil lawsuit that was filed in 2022, the 3 Stoughton police officers we just discussed allegedly commenced inappropriate relations with Birchmore during her enrollment in the Explorers program. The police officers involved were the twins Matthew Farwell, his brother William Farwell, and Robert Devine, who was the head of the whole thing. An internal investigation that was launched by Stoughton Police Chief Donna McNamara claims that Matthew Farwell began inappropriate physical contact with Birchmore when she was only 15 years old and he was 27. So red flag number 3, this went on for quite some time until Mr. Farwell apparently wanted to break things off. Surveillance video shows Farwell entering Birchmore's apartment only to leave 28 minutes later, 3 days before her body was discovered. Court documents allege that Sandra Birchmore was pregnant at the time, and Sandra had told people that Matthew Farwell was the father, who he, of course, claimed was not his. A twist in the story, birth certificate records show Matthew Farwell's wife gave birth to a baby in Newton, Massachusetts, one day after Birchmore and Farwell's final interaction. Rosie, can you tell us more about what we know or don't know about what happened when Mr. Farwell went over to Birchmore's apartment?
He was caught on surveillance footage. He stayed for about half an hour, I think. I'm not sure if he had a key but she was seen arriving shortly before him.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess there's 2 stories. The first story that I understand, and it's hard to know because, of course, we were not there and we don't know. We have no idea what transpired. But one of the versions is that he wanted to break up with her and he broke it off. And he told her in no uncertain terms that was it. That was the end. And, police at that time claimed that she committed suicide. But as we're going to find out in a minute, that's not necessarily true. Yoli, Laney, Red, any thoughts so far, or should I go forward?
I just have a question, and I'm still getting up to speed on this case, but did they do any kind of DNA testing on the baby or anything to find out?
No, they did not. Good question, but no, they did not.
And I only heard recently that she was cremated as well. So, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's insane.
So we arrive at the fact that Sandra Birchmore's death was a homicide, even though law enforcement at that time said there was no crime. The police report actually comes out and says there was no crime, and it was alleged that she took her own life. And that was that for quite a while. That was just that, and nothing happened. But Sandra Birchmore's family hired famous forensic pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden. He's an experienced forensic pathologist who goes all the way back to the O.J. Simpson days, and he's the former chief medical examiner in New York City. And he then said, based on what he saw, his conclusion is that Birchmore's death was a homicide. And then to answer your question, Yoli, not really though, Dr. Baden questioned whether the Massachusetts investigators properly tested clothes, biological material, or preserved fetal tissue that could have been used to find the identity of the baby's father. So the answer to your question, Yoli, no, That was never done. Was that crazy?
That's, to me, I'm just seeing this with law enforcement and their investigations. It seems like lately, not lately, I mean, it's been a pattern that these investigations are deteriorating. They're not doing what they need to do to investigate. I mean, they're just basically taking the easy way out and saying, oh, looks like a suicide, that's it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that this must like seem pretty horrifying. I don't know what California is like, but I imagine, I mean, a lot of people always complain about like the ridiculous laws and procedures and stuff like that. It must like, I just imagine it looks a little horrifying, where it's just like we have Massachusetts here. And obviously, especially we're so close to New York, where you have all these people. A few years back, we have the, anti-police riots and stuff going on, where it's just like now you're seeing here and you're looking at Massachusetts, and it's in the eyes of the public on social media and everything, this is probably just looking so messy and disastrous for people who have distrust. This is like something really needs to be done to be taken care of this, because this is going to stir up a public hysteria soon. This is like repeated patterns at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when Dr. Baden questioned whether the Massachusetts investigators properly tested the clothes, the biological material, or the fetal tissue, investigators declined comment. So I think we all kind of know what that means. So then renewed interest, both through the Karen Reed case, but through Dr. Baden's conclusions, renewed interest came to the case. And it turns out that before the Farwells, the officers who were alleged to have had these inappropriate relations with Sandra, but before they were hired by the Stoughton police, they had been arrested, both of them, for impersonating police officers. Apparently, they would drive around and pull people over. And this was widely known about by the Stoughton police, according to the wrongful death lawsuit that was filed in 2022. And Robert Devine was kept on the force after an internal affairs investigation concluded that Devine had abused his power as an officer in 2015 following a 60-day unpaid suspension. And the amazing thing, you guys tell me, I can't believe this. This is just nuts. That everything that we've said, there have never been any criminal charges filed ever to the present date. And I just find that crazy.
I don't get it either. And so the civil suit then would be, I haven't looked at it, but I would imagine it'd be for part of it is negligent hiring, supervision, training. Because if these officers, the Farwell twins, were impersonating officers before they even became officers, and it was known, then that should have been a red flag as to hiring them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, apparently they were trying to go for the state during the lawsuit, the wrongful death lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, part
As
of
they
it
should, honestly.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're
I
good.
was gonna say it's like I have relatives in the military. I have loved ones in the military, but it's almost like the trope of you have a destructive kid who wants to shoot guns, wanting to go to like the military, where it's just like you have someone where they've already proven that they're trying to pretend to be police officers as an abuse of power because they want to abuse that power, and then you're still allowing them to proceed.
Yeah.
Well, we'll take a look at that lawsuit in a minute. Now that you raised that, Yoli. Yoli, you are privy to a hearing that I didn't watch because I was writing something.
Yeah.
I'm trying really hard to continue to practice law, as are you. You know, some of these creators that just go on for hours and hours and hours, I don't understand. So tell us about this hearing that you saw.
Well, basically, it was a hearing about records that that I believe one of the Farwell twins wanted. They want these records from the Attorney General's office regarding the investigation, and apparently they're investigating. The Attorney General's office is investigating the actions of these officers with respect to Sandra Birchmore. And what it was like a sort of a shortened time hearing. I guess in California they call it ex parte hearing. That's what it sounded like, because I caught it midway. And one of the twins, I can't remember which, was wanting records from the Attorney General's office because they said in the civil case, they need them in the civil case. So this was a case in the civil, this was a hearing in the civil case. They said they needed the records to properly defend themselves in the civil case. So there was a dispute about that. And, the judge was phenomenal, at least from what I saw. And I didn't see the entire hearing, but a couple of people live streamed it. And the judge was making her reasoning known on the record about the pros and cons and what the law is. And as to the outcome, I believe the Attorney General's office basically admitted they haven't done anything, or they can't remember the last time, or they didn't know the last time they actually did any investigative steps in this case. The attorney for the Attorney General's office couldn't state when's the last time they did any investigative procedure, anything related to the case. She was not prepared, it seemed like, and it's been 3 years they've been investigating this. So it was quite enlightening.
That's crazy. I just checked the docket, and now I think what you're telling us about was this was a hearing on the motion to compel documents from the Attorney General's office, and this, I believe, was the fourth judge in the case. Same court, the Norfolk County Superior Court, as the Karen Reed case, but a different judge.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I watched part of that hearing. It was very interesting.
I do want to say, Yoli, thank you too for pointing out how you thought that the judge did a very good job at being clear and concise and transparent, because that's a critique that we have a lot of the time, not a lot of the time, but with some of these trials that we talk about, where, at the end of the day, we're all human, but it's not too much to expect the judge to be transparent to a degree. It's just like, like everybody is participating, everybody even observing is a human capable of understanding things. I think from the judge's point, how you're saying is just like they were very good about communicating. I think that goes a long way, especially with the public's trust.
And for Rosie, who's not from this country, it would be good for you to watch that hearing, because you must see these judges here and they seem so biased, and sometimes, and they don't make their reasoning clear. It's all just, and this judge seemed, at least from what I saw, and I didn't watch the entire thing, but from what I saw, it seemed like she seemed like a very good judge to me.
Rosie, do cases go on and on and on forever like this where you are?
Sometimes. Our system's very different. We don't have a jury here. So the whole thing's, completely different, but they do go on a while sometimes. Yeah.
This is the lawsuit that was brought by the family. Darlene Smith is the personal representative of the estate of Sandra Birchmore. Massachusetts calls it a personal representative. A lot of states would call it the administratrix or the executrix of the estate. And the lawsuit was brought against Matthew Farrell, William Farrell, Robert Devine, Joshua Heel, although I think his counts, this is the second amended complaint, and some of the complaint has been subject to motions to dismiss, some of which have been allowed. But in any event, a lot of it is still in effect. And these are the allegations that were made by Sandra's family. Also being sued, the town of Stoughton itself. Yoli, I think you were the one that asked, what about negligent hiring and wrongful death? Yeah, we'll get to all of that. We're not going to go through the whole complaint because it's 15 pages, but let's just take a look at the nature of the action. It's a suit that was brought by the plaintiff, Darlene Smith, as the personal representative of the estate of Sandra Birchmore for wrongful death, negligence, negligent supervision, negligent retention, pain and suffering, emotional distress, civil rights violations, and civil conspiracy as against the defendants Matthew Farrell, William Farrell, Robert Devine, Joshua Heel, the town of Stoughton, and the Stoughton Police Department. for claims arising out of an ongoing scheme of grooming Sandra Birchmore, who will hereinafter be referred to as the decedent, or Ms. Birchmore, and misconduct that ultimately led to the loss of Ms. Birchmore's life on February 4th of 2021 after the defendants Matthew and William Farwell, Robert Devine, here and after collectively the officers, and Josh Heel undertook to engage in inappropriate relationships with the decedent, abusing her trust and adoration of law enforcement, which through their inappropriate and undue influence ultimately led to her to allegedly take her own life. So this lawsuit apparently was drafted and filed prior to the new forensic pathologists coming in and making his findings, where he now, contends that his conclusion is, nope, she didn't take her own life. So plaintiff brings the action against the town of Stoughton, hereinafter referred to as Stoughton, for claims arising from the conduct of Heel and its officers, and against the Stoughton Police Department, hereinafter referred to as PD, for claims arising from the conduct of the officers and its negligence in its supervision of officers over the duration of the Stoughton Police Explorers program. So folks, feel free to chime in, because I'm going to pass over all this stuff. This is legal stuff. Anytime you bring a lawsuit, you've got to prove jurisdiction, venue. I've redacted the addresses of people. February 4th, 2021, the Canton Police Department responded to a welfare check at her apartment located in Canton. She had moved to Canton. That's how they say it there, Canton. It's like it doesn't have a T in it. Following a request from her employer, who was justifiably concerned as she had not reported to work for several days. And it was during this welfare check that her body was found, and she was pronounced dead at the scene by the responding paramedics. At the time of her death, upon information and belief, Ms. Birchmore was 3 months pregnant with her first child, allegedly by one of the defendants. Ms. Birchmore's death was the culmination of a near decade-long scheme of grooming and repeated assaults from a young age by certain police officers employed by the PD. So,
did they name them on the document?
I'm sorry?
Did they name them on the document?
Name who? The police officers?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we named them
They're
up
named
above.
individuals.
Yeah, they're up here. They're all up here. They're right there. They're the officers right there.
Sorry.
And then I skipped past this part, so it was a good question. In a lawsuit, you have to name who the parties are and identify them. So yeah, they're all right there. I often say that the interesting thing is always in the footnotes. And Red, you had kind of asked about this before, so chime in if you'd like. But they put in the footnotes of this complaint that grooming is a method used by offenders that involves building trust with a young person and the adults around the young person in an effort to gain access and time alone with them. In extreme cases, offenders may use threats and physical force to assault the child. More common, though, are subtle approaches designed to build relationships with families. The offender may assume a caring role, befriend the child, or even exploit their position of trust and authority to groom the young person and their family. So that's kind of an important thing, to bring the family in. We don't know a lot about Sandra Birchmore's family other than that her mother and her grandmother passed away when she was young. And she did have a lot of trauma. And so these people, the groomers, intentionally build relationships with the adults around a child, or seek out a child who is less supervised by adults in their life. And that increases the likelihood that the offender's time with the child is actually welcomed and encouraged. So, Rosie, what are your thoughts?
Well, on that footnote, actually, I think I read somewhere or heard somewhere that before she passed, Sandra Birchmore's mother thanked the program, said that she had done really well there, something like that. So it kind of makes sense as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like priests, like in these cases where there's abuse by priests, the priests they work with the family, and that's how they gain access to, they gain more access to the child. I mean, I'm just speaking generally, but it's kind of like these people who are in positions of power that they get close to the family, and
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard a lot of the times that he tried to contact Sandra or Birchmore, he was on patrol. So I feel like that just says a lot about why the relationship was happening. I feel like it was a big power thing. I guess all the cases are, but still.
Yeah,
yeah.
this is the kind of thing we heard a lot about when we heard about the awful cases of the priests, and here it is with this Explorer program. And I'm a skeptic. People tell me I'm skeptical of everything, as well I should be. But a lot of people say, "Oh, well, it's law enforcement, so it's okay." She's going over to the police station, although I think a lot of times they went to the schools. But I was reading the comments from someone else's episode, and the people in the comments said, "Never trust your kids with anyone," and that's sad, but I guess true. No.
No, it's unfortunate too, because at the end of the day, like, you want to be able to like entrust your kid to be able to go and experience the world, and you want them to go and see what the police department is like, and you want them to be inspired, and you want to send them to like sleepaway camp, and you want to have them have all these opportunities to build your career. Like, you want them to go and get an internship and work and do all of this stuff. So you want them to be able to develop independence, but at the same time you have these people who are preying on, unfortunately in this situation, very vulnerable people. There's could be 100 people that go through this program and they don't experience any issues, but it's that one person that has these vulnerabilities that's going to get caught up in it. And the predators people are going to take advantage of that when they see that kind of weakness. So it's not like weakness, but like when they see an opportunity, essentially. It's hard. It's, having kids takes a whole neighborhood. I give so much credit to parents because it's hard. It's like the kid has to go to school. You need a babysitter when you're working. You want the kid to go to after school programs. You want to be able to feel confident in your decisions as to what you're doing. So
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that there have been so many cases where that trust that you really need to have has been violated. Let's take another look at this complaint. I'm not going to read it all again. We'd be here for hours. Paragraph 12. Barwell was seen on video surveillance at Ms. Birchmore's apartment approximately 4 days prior to the discovery of her body. And I believe that was February 1st of 2022. And upon information and belief, was the last person to see Ms. Birchmore alive. It was later revealed by the PD internal investigation report that Farwell had known the decedent since age 13 due to her participation in the program, and soon thereafter began an inappropriate relationship with her when she was 15. So this grooming process probably took 2 years. I'm just reading between the lines.
Wow. Yeah.
The investigation revealed that Farwell had a continuous inappropriate relationship with Ms. Birchmore that started while she was still a minor. The same investigation determined that Farwell later used, look at this. The same investigation determined that Farwell later used some type of location sharing application to track and determine Ms. Birchmore's location. So he was stalking her. If not, I don't know. I don't know, Yoli and Rosie, if that meets the legal definition of stalking, but he practically was.
Well, the interesting thing is it says the PD internal investigation determined by a preponderance of the evidence. So that's not to, beyond a reasonable doubt. So perhaps that's why they are not charging him with stalking, because it says, I'm just curious by that use, preponderance of the evidence, and that's a civil standard, not a criminal standard.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the civil standard. So that would be evidence in this civil case, a preponderance of the evidence. and it would have to rise to the level of beyond a reasonable doubt. But it would seem to me, and I don't know, it would, because we're not privy to the internal investigation, but it would seem to me that either they have that kind of electronic data or they don't. And if they have it, it would seem to me that that's beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, that's my speculation, but that's what I'm thinking. I don't know.
Oh, I was just going to say, in the Mika Miller case, there was he was tracking her as well with various devices. So it seems to me you're right, Andrew. Either they have it or they don't. So it's kind of
that doesn't make any.
Well, I was going to say, I think that the reason that it could be a gray area to a degree is because you have apps like Snapchat where people publicly make themselves available. So is it really stalking if he got it from a public place? And you brought up another point about how, the civil wording of this. I was wondering too, is that the reason that they're going after this civilly because they think that they're going to have a stronger chance of winning in civil court. And because one of my thoughts too is that if, like, even on the outcome of this, I don't know what the statute of limitation is, but it's almost putting that at risk where you're going through this civilly instead of criminally at first, but also how are you going to criminally go against the police that you're accusing of being corrupt? So
you can do it. I've been involved in some civil rights litigation, Section 1983 against police. It's not the easiest litigation in the world, but it can be done, and people do it. So let's press on. The same investigation determined that not only did all three of the officers have relationships with Ms. Birchmore, but that Devine, the supervisor, effectively established the Farwells as his understudies in using their position and influence to engage in inappropriate behaviors with minors during the program and with the decedent while on duty. So this goes back to something that we said at the very beginning of the program, that they maybe these people, the Farwells, kind of learned it from other people, and now they're passing this awful conduct on. I mean, I don't know. Whole thing's crazy to me. So we'll just read a couple of more of these, and then we'll move forward. The initial investigation determined Ms. Birchmore owned a cat when she passed. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this count has been removed from the lawsuit, but it just basically says that she got a cat from the former animal control officer, Mr. Heel, and in order to get the cat, she had to do something inappropriate with him. And it was this ongoing pattern of abuse and behavior over the near decade-long relationship that created and exacerbated the underlying trauma, mental and emotional distress suffered by Ms. Birchmore that ultimately overwhelmed the decedent's will to live and in turn caused her death. So again, this lawsuit was drafted and filed when the theory was still a suicide. And now that's changed. And so this complaint's already been amended twice. And as I had pointed out, it's been subject to motions to dismiss. But Yoli, as you and I both know, a complex piece of litigation like this is often the target of motions to dismiss, and little bits and pieces of it can be removed, but that doesn't mean the whole thing is taken on. So we've talked about the facts. These are all the factual allegations, and the rest of the complaint is just, what the legal counts are. Count 1 is wrongful death. Count 2 is negligence versus Farwell, Devine. Count 3 is negligence versus Devine. Count 4 is negligent hiring versus the Stoughton police. If they knew that these two characters had caused problems in the past, and to wit, they were impersonating police officers and they stopped cars. I mean, they, at the very least, and it was said that they were widely known to have known that, they should have at the very least investigated those things, which they didn't. Count 5 is negligent supervision against the Stoughton Police Department. That just basically means that, how can you be a police department and not know that this stuff is going on? Count 6, assault and battery. It's an assault and battery, folks. Kind of meets the definition of it. Count 7, negligent infliction of emotional distress against Devine, Heel, and the Stoughton Police Department. Count 8, negligent infliction of emotional distress. Again, count 9. This is the 1983, and for non-lawyers, 1983 is the United States codified version of civil rights violations. And, if all this stuff is true, if this is not a civil rights violation, I don't know what is. Then there's a conspiracy count, and that's it. That's it. That's the complaint. And okay, it was filed. This is the amended complaint. The initial complaint was filed in 2022. This second amended complaint was filed in January of 2023. So there we are.
I think from here on out, I think awareness is important, especially because I think that the timing with the Karen Reed case has really helped to highlight this case as well. So I think that the more attention that can be brought to this, the better. But I mean, all in all, it's a shocking case. Like, there's things I see about this case where I'm still shocked. Like, no charges for the police officers to date, stuff like that. I mean, I think that a lot of people do need to hear about it. It's a really, really shocking case.
Yeah.
When we were doing the Karen Reed episodes, we just shook our heads. For example, when Michael Proctor went on the stand and said the things that he said, and then when some of the other investigative officers went on the stand and talked about solo cups and using a leaf blower, and it turned out that the number one of the things, that it's not as salacious as Proctor's testimony, but one of the things that really stood out to me was, all right, they're bringing a criminal charge against Karen Reed, saying that she backed up her car, and that's what killed John O'Keefe. But as we pointed out a little bit earlier, the standard of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. Their own expert got on the stand and he said, oh, well, the accident's consistent with a sideswipe. What do you mean consistent? You got to have your accident reconstructionist say, this is what happened. And the other just crazy thing that was, I'll say it was just stupid. Their own accident guy, who really wasn't a reconstructionist, he was just a guy that, looked at accidents and wrote reports. He said that the evidence was, quote unquote, consistent with a vehicle strike. Well, consistent with is down here, and the duty to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt is up here. So I can't, and we're going to do another episode on that, and I'll stop my rant right now because it made the Commonwealth's own case made zero sense. So that they bring a case with such little evidence makes me shake my head when I think about what happened in this case to Sandra Birchmore. And, this goes back years and there have been no criminal charges. Really? And Massachusetts. All right, I'll shut up. I'll just make one more statement.
No, go ahead.
Massachusetts is supposed to be one of the more liberal, progressive states, with all due respect to you there, Yoli, because I think California takes the cake, but I think Massachusetts is right behind it. And it lets something like this happen. It lets, allegations like we've just talked about just pass for years with no criminal charges. Really?
Yeah. And if you get a chance, watch the hearing that happened today, because you will see that the Attorney General's office is really not sure about the status of the investigation. And I think the judge made a comment about, she was speaking to the Attorney General's, the attorney that appeared on behalf of the Attorney General, and was saying, your statements are vague, they're not specific, and it's just kind of harsh.
So there were three. What's the tie-in with Karen Reed for somebody that's just tuning into our podcast? Why do they talk about Karen Reed? This is a different case. There were three agencies that determined that Karen Reed was responsible for John O'Keefe's death, allegedly. 1, the Canton police. 2, the state police. 3, the Norfolk County DA's office. And they never pursued any other angle except suicide and Birchmore's death. So they didn't investigate Matthew Farwell's potential involvement in her death, and they made a lot of the same mistakes they did in the Karen Reed case. In both instances, a police officer was not treated the way a normal civilian would have been, despite being potential suspects under normal circumstances. So, I mean, I'd like to believe that, I mean, we read the newspapers all the time and we do hear about, cases of horrible things that happen to young people. And I would like to think that everybody would be treated equally. But doesn't it seem in this case, anybody here, doesn't it seem in this case that they kind of looked the other way because it was police officers and, we don't want to make the police department look bad?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard too because I default to just wanting it to be oversight, but like you said, it's a repeated pattern of behavior. I need to know, like, how is the, like, how were they able to determine that he was even following her around? They had to have that information somewhere, which means that presumably the police department potentially had access to her phone. And so they must have had some inkling, but I think also it's kind of like, oh, well, he's one of our officers. He wouldn't do it. Like, it just wanting to take it at face value, what they think it is. But the thing, anytime that I've had like an actual issues, and like I've said this before, I have family members that are in the police department. I care about people that are in the police department. This isn't an all cops thing, but I've definitely had instances where there was a crowbar and underwear outside my window. I called the police. They're like, what do you want us to do? I'm like, I don't know, take this stuff. They're just like, well, this is too rusty to take fingerprints, so there's nothing we can do with it. And they left the underwear in the bush in my tree. So it's like, thankfully my underwear, but that doesn't make it less creepy. It's just a lot of the time when we got broken into, same instance where they're just like, all right, well, no forced entry, we're not gonna, like, you want us to come over, like, from us. And it's hard because everybody watching this has their own jobs. Andrew, Yoli, as well as most people, that their work is hard and that there's a million things to do and that there's a million different cases to take care of and a million different people you got to cater to. So, people are human, but at the same time, it's the police. Like, why do we have a police force if not to leave the people feeling more safe? This is a pattern of behavior that is leading people to be justifiably freaking out.
Yeah.
And I think that it also leaves room for, like, if that's the conduct of the police, then imagine the conduct of the police when the police are the perpetrator. That it's going to make it worse, obviously, because if they're willing to act like that when it's not possibly their own people, imagine if it is.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Go ahead, Yul. I was just going to point out that the other connection between the Karen Reed case and the Sandra Birchmore case is that some of the people are the same, and the local media in Boston has been all abuzz about that. You remember Sergeant Michael Lank? He's now a lieutenant, but he was one of the first officers on the scene at Sandra Birchmore's home. Well, he was also a law enforcement witness in the Karen Reed case. He was on the scene in front of the Albert home before O'Keefe's body was even removed, and testified that he didn't really feel the need to go inside. He was there while the Solo cups were being used as some kind of forensic blood collection. Kevin Albert responded to this scene where Sandra Birchmore was found, and he was said not to have participated in the Reed investigation, but Kevin Albert is the brother of Brian Albert, in front of whose home John O'Keefe's body was found. Kevin Albert, by the way, is now on paid administrative leave, suspended from duty with pay, pending an outside independent investigation into a case that he investigated with Michael Proctor 2 years ago. And finally, there's the district attorney, Michael Morrissey. Michael Morrissey is the district attorney in the office that pressed the charges against Karen Reed, and which failed to bring any charges against anyone in connection with what happened to Sandra Birchmore, any of the inappropriate relationships or her death. And so how do you sit at your desk and you say, we're going to go after Karen Reed, but we hear these things about what happened, and whatever. What's in the paper today? I mean, it boggles my mind.
And the thing is with the Karen Reed case too, like one of their biggest failures almost was going for her so hard. I feel like they, potentially could have won had they tried to pursue lesser charges. It wouldn't have brought so much media attention. But I think because they wanted to get her for all of that, it had to have been intentional. She couldn't have just only been drunk. I think that was kind of their downfall. And it's just like put them in the highlight that there are for now for us to go and be like, oh my God, it's like they're going so hard for this random woman, like you said, Andrew, and we're just, not looking at this case that's so close to home, which even like you would think too that because this person had ties with the police that they would be even more like have more personal stake into wanting to find out what was wrong and caring. You would think that there would be some like a sympathetic emotional attachment where they're like, oh my God, we gotta really get to the bottom of this. Is this really what happened?
Yeah, Lainey, we often ask people to comment on our cases, and I welcome comments because this case has a lot of facts. It goes really deep, and I don't know if our people will want us to do this or not. This is a summary, right, Rosie? You've delved into this. This is a summary, right? There's an awful lot more. For example, the police report, the multiple page police report goes on and on and on. We didn't read the entire complaint. The police reports, I should say, because there are multiple aspects to it, raise some very interesting questions. So let us know down below. Don't tell us, well, you missed that or you missed that, because I know we missed a lot. This case, yeah. If this case is like all those books behind me, we just looked at the index of the first book back there. So let us know what you think. Yeah. If you want us to go forward, we'll do more. The civil litigation is pending. There are no charges criminally as of yet. I could look at the police report. I've read it. It's just, I've already read enough stuff today. I don't want to bore everybody, and I don't want to go for 2.5 hours. So those are my closing thoughts. Please give us a thumbs up if you've liked this. Tell us what you would like us to do in the future. Not that we missed something, because I know we missed a lot.
Yeah. And me too. I mean, I'm still getting, familiar with this case, and I only watched part of the hearing this morning, so I don't want to misrepresent what was said in the hearing, but that's why I say you guys should watch it. It's very interesting, and in terms of the judicial demeanor and how the judge conducts herself, it seems that it's a good example of how a judge should be, in my opinion. But I only watched part of it, so I couldn't tell you the rest.
Yeah, I will check that out. I will check that out. And just the docket sheet in the civil case, just the docket sheet goes on and on. I don't know how many events. I think there were close to 75, 80, 85, 90 events. So there's a lot, and we glossed over poor Sandra Birchmore's life. Such an unfortunate story where she lived to be 23 years old. And apparently, from what I've read, she was looking forward to being a mother. The last time she was seen, the last day she was seen anyhow, she was seen bringing baby stuff into her apartment. And it's so, what a tragic, horrible, horrible case. Just
yeah, and I do want to say to our commenters, really let us know what you think in the comments down below, because it's hard when trying to pick topics for our videos, because we've seen in the past, I know it's hard to watch things that involve minors, and you guys, like I've mentioned before, a lot of you guys are parents yourselves or have, at this point, older kids or younger kids. So like Rosie mentioned before, I think it's important to spread information on this and look more deep into it. Let us know, what you think, share it with your friends. I mean, at this point, I'm sorry if you're watching from Massachusetts, you're probably pulling your hair out, but we appreciate you guys watching.
Yeah, please be sure to watch Rosie True Crime Overtime. She has a great channel. You've done some great work, Rosie. I've watched your episodes, and I think you've done some great work. I know that you've guested quite a bit with some other people, but thank you for giving us your time. I always ask our guests, what are your closing thoughts, Rosie, for us on this case?
Oh, just to thank you guys as well for bringing awareness to this case, because I know not a lot of channels are covering it. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for having me over as well.
Well, thank you. Red, you did. I have to give credit where credit is due. Red is our intern this summer, and she did 90% of the work on the graphics that you saw here. I just tweaked them up a little bit, so thank you for that. Do you have any closing thoughts on this case, Red?
Oh, this is just so heartbreaking. Like, not only were those pretty much her idols, like, that's really what she wanted to be when she was older. The power difference is just like, it's like unfathomable.
It is unfathomable. Okay, thank you. If you like this episode, not that you like what we were talking about, but if you like the way we took a look at it, give us a thumbs up, subscribe. Thank you, and have a great day. You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions.
That's that.
And
that's
that is that in this case. Rosie left us, but
okay.
why don't we just say, hey, everybody have a great day. Everybody say goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.